Hey, Hoosier fans, welcome back to another Summer Series interview. Fall sports are right around the corner, which means we get to talk about IU men's soccer. And here today, joining myself and Griffin Gonzalez, Thomas Warr, senior forward on this IU men's soccer program. Thomas, how we doing?
Doing well, Greg. Thanks for having me on.
Well, we appreciate you coming on and hanging out with us here for a few minutes. It's an exciting time for you guys as soccer players, or at least it's going to be very soon. We hope here in a couple of weeks, July 13th, that date that you can start to do some summer activities. Catch us up on what these last few months have been like for you. Where are you at right now? And, what's this summer been like?
Yeah, well, it's been a weird one for sure. And I think every sport across IU athletics can attest to that. I am back home right now, north side of Indianapolis, living in my mom's house. But yeah, it's been pretty lonely, to be honest. It's a lot of doing workouts by yourself, figuring out how you can get better without being in the team environment, which we're all super used to. So it's definitely been different in that aspect. But our team especially has been lucky enough to get together a lot on stuff like this, on Zoom meetings. So I've seen a lot of my teammates still. But yeah, it's been unique for sure.
What have you been doing to stay busy, maybe outside of, staying in shape and things like that? What are you doing on a day-to-day basis to keep busy?
At the beginning, I relied a lot on my Xbox and my TV. But, as time went on, that gets a little boring. So actually, I tried to put the technology away for a little bit. We have a kind of state park close to my house, so I've been doing a lot of hikes and stuff with a couple buddies there, just getting out and really enjoying the weather, enjoying some time, and getting away from the screen a little bit.
Well, you brought it up, so I naturally have to ask, what's the go-to game on Xbox? I had to. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, I totally understand. I'm a big FIFA guy, and I have been I think I've bought the last 20 billion FIFA games. FIFA's probably my number one. Dabble a little bit of Fortnite in there and a little bit of Warzone in there, but I'd say FIFA's the go-to.
Where do you rank among the roster as far as FIFA skills? Who's top dog in the locker room?
It's funny because we actually had a team tournament, but we did it in pairs. So we did 2-on-2, and I was paired with my roommate, Jacob Gruber, who had never played a game of FIFA in his life. So I think my skills were a little bit jaded by his lack of skills. So we actually haven't done a lot of one-on-one comparisons. So, but there's a couple guys that like to say they're pretty good. I know Herb thinks he's pretty good. Quentin thinks he's pretty good, but I think we need to play a little more FIFA as a team to find out.
Thomas, kind of going back to what you were saying earlier about how it's mainly been individual workouts. Take us a little more in depth on that. For a soccer player, what do those workouts look like? And, at what point what's the difficulty kind of getting a feel for how you are improving when you don't have teammates around you to compare?
Yeah, well, I think the number one difficulty right now is it's easy for an individual when you're not with a team to say, nah, I'm not really feeling this workout today or something like that. So I think that's been definitely a challenge for me, and speaking to my teammates as well, is just, when you're going to the workout or when you're going to the weight room with all your boys, it's easy, energy's high, you're like, let's go crush this lift, whatever. But when you're by yourself, you got other things going on. It's easy to not kind of get up for the occasion, I guess. But as far as the workouts go, our summer program is a lot of fitness, obviously getting us ready for preseason, and combining that with a lot of core strength, not necessarily weights, but a lot of body weight, plyo stuff. Just improving any way we can, really.
What's been the big focus for you these last few months as an older guy on the roster, maybe taking more of a leadership role to try and, make sure some of the younger guys, but everybody on the team understands that, how difficult maybe it is, that it's really critical that you got to bring your own energy, and how important it is that, when you show up on day one, the beginning of the offseason may look a little different because of everything that's been going on.
Definitely. Well, we are definitely blessed with a roster full of guys that don't need much external motivation. I mean, if you're not playing soccer at IU if you can't, motivate yourself to get better every day. But I've definitely, I think, been stepping into more of a leadership role in terms of, just keeping the guys connected, I think. And that's something that our coach has been stressing a lot on right now is it's easy for teams to, in this moment in time, to not see each other for a couple weeks or a month. But we're on Zoom, we're communicating twice, 3 times a week, because that's a huge aspect of our program is just that communication, that relationship building. So I think that's probably been what I've been focusing on the most is, just reaching out to everybody, just making sure everyone's doing well, asking about stuff outside soccer and just in keeping and maintaining that relationship.
Thomas, I'm curious. You talk about, coming to Indiana, playing for this type of program. This is one of, if not the most storied program in college soccer. I'm curious, as a player inside that locker room, what is the added pressure that comes with it, but the added meaning as well that comes with it, the good and the bad side of that?
I would say we feel not very little pressure, but it's not a ton of pressure. It's more confidence, honestly. Knowing we're there for a reason. Every individual player worked their lives to be here. And yes, it's a traditional, it's a historic program. And we're all happy to be there. But when you throw on that jersey, man, you kind of smile a little bit, you're just overtaken with that confidence. And it's not really I have to play well because I'm playing at a school. It's more of a, I'm here for a reason. Let's go kick this team's ass sort of thing.
How much does Coach Yeagley play into that from, the process, right? You always hear that term when you talk about the full length of a season. If maybe early on there are some bumps and bruises of some kind, but how much does he just continue to instill that mentality inside the roster of just, you guys are good enough to be here. You're here for a reason. And we've seen the results for decades now that, this program is going to be in a great spot come postseason time.
Definitely. He's huge in that. And I would say one really big role that he plays is communicating to guys that maybe aren't in the starting 11 or maybe aren't even getting onto the field in the game. Because those players, and I've been in that position definitely in times of my IU career, but those are the players that can stray away from the path a little bit when they're not seeing the field. They don't really see their contribution. Yates is always harping on that because the truth is every single player on our roster is vital to our success. And we truly believe we have one of, if not the deepest benches in college. I mean, when it's a couple days before a game and it's, maybe a starting 11 versus a reserve team in training, man, those reserve team players, me included, I've been there a lot. We love to beat the starting 11, and it happens relatively frequently. I mean, we are a very, very deep team, and every single player plays a huge role, whether you're scoring 10 goals a season, keeping shutouts like Trey Muse did, or, being a guy on the bench that's cheering your boys on and working as hard as you can in practice. So Yates definitely distills that message behind a lot of the stuff he does, that everyone plays a huge role on this team.
Thomas, take Greg and I into the IU men's soccer locker room. What's the mood in there? What are the guys like? Who's the funniest on the team? Take us inside. What are we looking at?
Man, it's a loaded question for sure. We talking game day or we talking everyday sort of practice stuff?
Let's go both.
Yeah.
Let's get 2 answers here.
All right, so I'll start with game day because that's probably a little bit easier. Game day is a lot quieter. A lot of guys do their own music, do their own headphones, get in their own zone. So not a ton of back and forth, not a ton of banter like a practice locker room. but yeah, man, practice locker room, it's a wild card for sure. Funniest on the team, I'd say my opinion's probably a little jaded because I've lived with him all 3 years, but Jacob Gruber has some crackers. He's a funny guy. I'd say the one word to describe our locker room is pretty goofy. If you saw us on the game field, you think, man, these guys are down to business. They're hard workers, but we love to have our fun. A lot of jokes. We play a lot of flicks and juggling games in the locker room. Pretty lighthearted, just having fun.
Thomas, Griffin and I are always fascinated by talking to athletes and if there are any unique game day rituals or every game routines. You, maybe somebody else in the locker room, you mentioned just everybody being down to business. Anybody do anything weird? Like they have to do a certain thing before the game? Any weird game day rituals?
Well, I do nothing crazy, but I put all of my right leg attachments on. I'll do my socks, my guards, my tape, my boot, and then I'll do my left, and then I'll tie both of them. So that's something I've done since before I got to IU, and it's, more of a superstition thing. I'm trying to think. Nothing jumps out as super, super weird. I would kind of say just a lot of guys like to get in the zone, kind of block everything out. Like you'll see a lot of guys before the game, maybe like head between their legs, eyes closed. I'm trying to think. Jack Mayer last year, he liked to, when we got up to Armstrong, he'd like to walk on the game field before everyone was out there, before he got his stuff on and visualize stuff. You see his head moving. You see him, going through moments that he thinks are going to happen in the game. You see him, making headed clearances, stuff like that. So that can be maybe a little funny to the outside eye, but definitely understandable if you're a player.
Thomas, you really haven't been with your team that much. You guys haven't been able to really have spring workouts or even early summer workouts. I guess my question here is, obviously you miss it. You've gone into how you miss the guys already, but I guess the deeper question is, do you feel like it hurts the team a little bit not getting to be out there? And if so, is it going to be that hard to recover that in the coming weeks with a shortened workout schedule?
Yeah, well, it sure doesn't help. That's for sure. But the way we've been looking at it is kind of maybe comparing ourselves to other programs around the country. And I think credit to Yags, to everyone in the compliance office, allowing us to do as much as we can. But I think from day one, when we were back home, we were, meeting 2 or 3 times a week. We're doing workouts via Zoom. We're just getting after it from the start. So I think in terms of preparation, we're doing all that we can. And a lot of it is kind of like I alluded to earlier, it's the individual trust component where it comes down to the individual to get their stuff done, to be prepared, to do what they need to do so they're ready to come back when we can and start preseason. So I think collectively as a group, we're pretty confident of where we are. Obviously, a lot of people haven't maybe played in a college soccer environment in a while when it comes to actually playing the game. But no one has, so it's going to be a weird start for sure. Maybe a little bit more of an adjustment period, maybe take some teams a little bit longer, a couple more games to really find their stride. But in terms of preparation, we feel pretty confident that we're going to be ready to go.
Thomas, let's talk about a little bit more about your background. I see one of the framed photos behind you, but I've heard that you growing up were quite the hockey player as well. Talk about that experience of being able to play multiple sports. And I'm curious, especially just with hockey to soccer, obviously different sports, but I imagine they do have some similarities as far as how you approach the game and maybe things that you can take from one sport to the other.
Yeah, definitely. I played both hockey and soccer literally my whole life. My dad grew up playing hockey. That was his kind of number one sport. So he had me on skates when I was 3 or 4. So I've grown up loving both games. And it wasn't until going into my junior year of high school that I kind of really committed to one over the other. You know, it was then I said, I really want to continue with soccer, and that's really my passion. That's where I want to go. And I was lucky enough, when I joined the academy, that was a huge roadblock, was that, you know, two-sport athletes weren't very common there because it's such a time restraint. But my academy coach, Phil Presser, was very understanding, and he knew the soccer player I was. So he was willing to give and take a little bit. You know, I'd maybe miss a training for soccer for a hockey practice or something like that. It was a lot of just working stuff out. But I'm super blessed that I got to do both. And kind of to your comment, to where they're different sports, but they're very similar. I would say that the number one similarity and why I enjoy both sports so much is that it's free flowing. It's every player is making split second decisions throughout the game. You know, it's not like a football where you run a play and then you rest. It's all figuring stuff out for yourselves. It's open play. And then I think the physicality aspect of hockey is really, really helped me in soccer as well. That's something I pride myself on in my soccer game is I like to create a little contact. I like to feel other players. And yeah, I mean, I've had a definitely unique experience, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. Super lucky to be able to play both sports.
So being from Indiana, where there's not a hockey team, who'd you cheer on growing up?
You know, that's a funny question because 90% of Indiana guys are Blackhawks fans due to proximity. But when I really, really started watching professional hockey, maybe 7 or 8, I fell in love with Alex Ovechkin. So I am a diehard Capitals fan and have been for years. So a couple of years ago was a groundbreaker for me. I was waiting a long time for them to win the Stanley Cup.
Being an Indy guy, as Griffin mentioned, what are your other teams growing up, or even now? You know, in your college days, I see Peyton Manning's jersey behind you. Who are the go-to, you know, teams outside of hockey that you really cheered on growing up?
Yeah, Colts. You nailed it on the head. I'm lucky enough; my parents have had season tickets to Colts games since the RCA Dome for a while, so I was lucky enough to go to a lot of games. And I'm only 20 minutes from downtown, so a lot of Colts games. Huge Colts fan. I'm not a huge Pacers fan. I'm not a diehard basketball fan, but I definitely will cheer them on, and I would say that is my basketball team. Soccer-wise, I'm a Chelsea guy. I'm a Blue. Kind of the same sort of thing with the Capitals as when I was younger and started watching. Didier Drogba for Chelsea was my guy. Kind of tried to emulate him when I stepped on the field as a 10-year-old. You know, it's one of those things. So I've been watching Chelsea since a very young age. So yeah, I would say Chelsea, the Capitals, and the Colts are probably my three vices.
Well, Thomas, kind of why we're pivoting here. We want to ask you a few questions, kind of get to know you a little bit better. Some quick hitters for you. This one's always a classic. I love asking this. I'm going to limit you. You cannot say Armstrong. You cannot say workout facility. When you get back to Bloomington, what is one of your favorite places to go on campus, off campus, just automatic go-to for Thomas Warr?
ZNC when I get back. Yeah.
Like stop, like before you even get home, you gotta stop there and get some food.
If it's open, I went down to Bloomington a couple weeks ago to get some stuff out of my apartment, and it was closed, and I almost shed a tear. When you haven't had it in a while, that's my dirty little secret for sure.
That's the first time we've heard that answer, and that might be my favorite answer that we've had so far. ZNC, that is a fabulous answer. Can't go wrong there. How about just favorite aspect of being a member of the IU men's soccer team? Favorite part of Bloomington, if you had to narrow it down to a thing or two, you know, what, as you've been around for a few years, obviously, the fans, the facility. I mean, what is it about Bloomington that makes it such a special home?
Yeah, I think the the tradition that our program holds and the effect that it has on all of Bloomington. So like, for example, this past semester before we went online, I was taking a accounting information systems class in Kelly. And the first day, me and my roommate were actually in it together, and he was wearing his IU 8-star hat. And the professor came up to us before class started, and he said, "Are you guys soccer players?" And we said, "Yeah," and kind of introduced ourselves. And he goes, I won't talk to you guys too much about it right now because you'll see it on my slides. So we started class, and it's a syllabus day. It's the first class of the semester. So he's going through talking about who he is, what he likes to do, and maybe like the fourth slide was IU soccer. He's like, "I'm a diehard IU soccer fan. I go to every single game, every single home game, have been for 10 years. We have a phenomenal program." And yeah, so it's that love and appreciation that the community as a whole shares that makes us feel extra special. And I think it's probably something that is very, very rare for other college soccer programs to experience.
It doesn't have to be a memory you played in. It can be something you were a fan of, something you watched on TV, but all-time favorite sports moment, memory for you.
Man. All-time sports memory. Wow, that's a tough one. I think the Capitals winning the Stanley Cup was up there a couple years ago because that was a long time coming. Chelsea winning the Champions League was huge. I remember exactly where I was watching that game against Bayern Munich in penalties. I'd say it's a toss-up between those two. If I'm going to give a soccer answer, I'll definitely go Chelsea in the Champions League.
Very good. I meant to mention this earlier, but Bill Armstrong Stadium getting a little bit of a facelift here this offseason. How nice will that be for him, from a player perspective, being able to have those added, amenities and a part of that, and how much do you envision that from more of an outside perspective? Not that IU men's soccer needs, too many more bells and whistles to really attract some talent, aside from the tradition and the coaching staff and everything else, but how much does that help the brand of IU soccer?
Definitely. I would say a lot of people would think it's probably a long time coming, but yeah, we're super pumped. We've gotten to see kind of an inside look of the internal design and obviously what we're going to be moving into, and it's some pretty cool stuff. But I think probably the most important part for us is just the proximity and having a all in one spot, instead of going to our locker room and assembly hall and, just kind of bouncing around athletic facilities, which isn't a pain. I've never had a problem with, no one's complaining about, but, having that convenience factor is going to be huge for us, after class, go straight to our locker room, hang out in our lounge, have some snacks, and just kind of all be together at our stadium. And I think it'll give us more of a home feel, kind of hanging out where we play and where we do our business.
Thomas, it's kind of a dark time right now, and our entire world right now. 2020 has not been exactly it. But just, I'm curious from you and from your standpoint, being at home, what is one bright spot you've been able to take through all this, stuff that's been going on? What's been a high point for you that you've realized in the past few months?
Easy for me. It's kind of relationship building. I'm not sure if everyone's the same as me, but I feel like I've been communicating with so many more people because everyone's bored, honestly, in a sense. You're talking to more people, and we have all this technology. I actually have a ton of cousins, aunts, uncles around the country, some in Texas, a couple in Alaska, Oregon, all over the place. So kind of right when this thing started and everyone's home from work, not doing anything, we set up a weekly Zoom call. So one evening after dinner, we all just hop on and chat up a storm and just catch up with each other. When before this, I would go months without even talking to my cousins, to people that, I share a huge connection with. So that's definitely been a blessing in disguise, is kind of not reconnecting, but connecting on a more frequent basis with people that mean a lot to you.
I think that's a great perspective, and I know a perspective that a lot of people can agree with. Just being able to communicate with technology and taking advantage as much as you can of the opportunity that and the situation that everybody's been in the last few months. Thomas, final question here on this little summer sit down. If you can give the fans something that they don't know about you. We've talked about your hockey background, kind of your sports fandom outside of soccer and some things like that. Maybe an interest, a TV show that you've been binging and enjoyed. Give us something off the wall here about Thomas Warr that we don't know.
I would say, one thing that people might not think about me when they first look at me is I'm a little bit OCD. I'm kind of a clean freak. If you saw, and my roommate's actually the same way, which is why I've lived with him the past 3 years. But all my stuff is way cleaner, way more organized than I think your average college student is. Kind of a little bit scary in some points. Like I have my nightstand next to my bed. I have like my lamp and my fan and my remote that all have to be in the exact same spot before I can calmly fall asleep, sort of thing. I'd say that's kind of a unique, funny thing.
I feel like you don't see that much from college students, but I think that's a good problem to have, if you will. Well, Thomas, again, we really appreciate you talking with us for a little while here. We're excited to have your whole team and program back at Bill Armstrong here in the coming weeks. It'll be here before we know it. I know it's been a long summer for everybody, but we're hoping that everything gets back to as normal can be come the fall. But again, we really appreciate you talking to us, and best of luck here in the coming months.
Yeah, thank you guys. Had a blast today.